What is up, family? Welcome into another edition of Make Every Second Count Live. But this is a special edition of Make Every Second Count Live. No, it's not pre-recorded like it is sometimes, but it's the New Year's Eve edition. So that's just completely amazing. I hope everybody out there has a wonderful New Year's Eve. Be safe and have fun. All right. But I ask you guys if you would please share this video out. Invite all kinds of people to watch it. Give us all kinds of hearts, thumbs up, brownie faces. I can't hardly do that. Cry faces. Or heck, you can even get mad at us. It's okay. Just help us trick the algorithms on any of the socials that we're on. But I'm Jeff Marconette Jr. This is my show. And I want to help you guys overcome things that you are facing in your life. So we like to talk to people that have gone through things in their life. And you know the funny thing that I've learned? Each and every person out there goes through something at some point in time. But with no further ado, I would like to bring to the stage Miss Angel herself. Hi, Angel. How are you doing?
Hey Jeff, I'm doing great. How are you?
Oh, I
Happy
am
New Year.
fantastic. It's
Almost.
lovely to see your face.
Thank
And
you.
yeah, it's just cool. And I love your pink glasses as well.
Thank you very much. I get
You are
compliments
quite
on them.
welcome, miss. So, if you would like to go through a short introduction about yourself, tell everybody who you are, where you're from, and what you do. And I'm going to be inviting some people on my phone. So, I am looking down, but I am paying attention at the same time.
I remember you have those mad skills. Awesome. Well, hello, my name is Angel Prater, and I'm the founder of Alchemize Hope. Hope stands for Hope Driven Opportunities to Personally and Professionally Evolve. And I am currently living in Arizona, Phoenix, Arizona. And I provide training and coaching and technical assistance to crisis workers, first responders, healthcare providers, etc., to help them apply trauma informed care principles through a trauma aware approach, which is a 4-step proprietary process, so that you or they can not only utilize the trauma informed care principles as described by SAMHSA in their work, but also in their personal lives, because we all have trauma. And we're not necessarily teaching individuals how to take the information and apply the information. So it's kind of left up to uh, interpretation, I guess,
Yeah.
and there isn't any continuity across our systems of care. So, and
Yeah.
that actually in turn helps with reducing burnout, reducing vicarious trauma, or at least being aware of vicarious trauma, and compassion fatigue. So, basically, in a nutshell, I'm here to help heal the healers and the helpers.
That's awesome. Now, all right. Well, first of all, I have to say that she has these she has this motto that she gives free hugs out. And oh, sorry, I had you running in the background too. That's not good. But she has this motto that she gives out free hugs to all kinds of people. Now, I'm lucky enough that I got one of those free hugs. Actually, I got more than one of those free hugs, but it was really cool. You see, I met her in Kansas City at the Becoming the Better You event. And I tell you what, guys, if you've never heard of this event, you definitely need to check it out because there are all kinds of speakers and just people giving love to you, and it's absolutely amazing. But you guys can check that out at www.comechangeyourlife.com. Again, that is comechangeyourlife.com. And it has definitely helped me, and I'm sure it has helped Angel change her life in ways that she could only imagine. But I know because when I was 17, I was in a severe car accident. I spent 2.5 months in a coma, 3.5 in the hospital. I was told I would never walk again. But guess what? I'm up and walking now. And I'm here to show other people that they can do what seems to be impossible, because impossible only means I am possible. But I had to grow through that stuff and become better in order to get to where I am today. So, has there been anything that you have had to grow through that led you to where you are now?
Yes, I think that if we're not growing, if we're not going through things, we're not growing. And so growth is part of evolution and us to really make a difference in the world. Allowing ourselves to share and be vulnerable about some of the difficulties that we experience in our life is part of that growth process as well. So me personally, I grew up on this a young teenager on the streets and had a lot of trauma that I experienced. And then when I was 24, I um, became an AmeriCorps member and spent 3 years in AmeriCorps and learned about our health systems and our behavioral health and social service systems. So for 28 years, I worked in behavioral health, clinical health, and criminal justice and social services. And one of the biggest things that I had to overcome in the last 5 years was the trauma and the burnout and the compassion fatigue that I experienced working in these systems of care. And these systems of care, people are dying because our system is broken. And that's not just the people that we serve, but also the people who work within the system. And that's pretty controversial a statement to make, but I'm not afraid to make it. Our traditional Western medicine system of care is driven by a large macro broken system. And we're not taking care of the people who work within that system. That's the docs, the nurses, the social workers, the law enforcement, the first responders in general. We're not taking care of people on the front lines, the peer supports, etc. And I really, 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 really decided in January of 2021 that I wanted to make a difference. I wanted to start moving away from working in a system of leadership in nonprofit leadership and running organizations and really put an emphasis on helping people who work within these systems also heal. Because in 2019, over 500 doctors on record died by suicide,
Oh my
and
God.
and every two to 300 nurses, social workers, etc., or veterans, law enforcement on record also die by suicide. And frankly, I think it's bullshit because they're afraid to talk about what's really going on when they're experiencing burnout, compassion fatigue, and their own trauma are activated and their own traumas, or they're getting vicariously trauma on top of their own traumas. And most don't even know about trauma and how it passes through epigenetics, how it affects the brain, how it creates a sense of showing up in the world. And these survival skills, for example, like suicide or self harm, et cetera, are really a trauma response. And so I aim to support through training, technical assistance, and coaching, and to individuals as well as organizations to help provide the missing link. And that is how to apply these trauma informed care principles into our systems of care, whatever system it is, whether it's a corporation or a hospital or an institution or a social service provider agency, to ensure that these principles are not only there to support the individuals that they're serving, but also to create an awareness and a platform, which I call is a pathway to hope through a trauma aware approach, applying these trauma informed care principles for your staff as well, for the people working in the system, and giving people an outlet to connect with others without fear of documentation being made or losing their license or losing their livelihood because of some of their own personal struggles. So that's what I know I've experienced, and many people along the way that I've observed and have been friends with in our similar roles, have experienced a lot of burnout, a lot of compassion fatigue, vicarious trauma, and their own mental health stuff that they won't talk about
What is
because of it.
vicarious trauma?
So if you and I were sitting here and I was providing support to you, say you came into the emergency room or or crisis team, and or maybe I'm a counselor, and you're repeatedly talking about your traumas and these very big experiences that you're struggling through to get over or to try to heal from. And the more I continue to hear these, the more they subconsciously and consciously impact my own mental health by creating what's called vicarious trauma. So that's one aspect. There's another aspect of vicarious trauma, and that is observing broken systems in our work. So, for example, if I'm providing support to somebody and I'm a counselor, or maybe I'm a nurse or a doctor, and I know that they would benefit from this service, but then this service isn't available because the insurance company won't pay for it. For example, if I know that somebody's living in the Pacific Northwest and suicide is rampant and what's called seasonal affective disorder, which is SADS, it's a form of depression in the DSM, which is the Diagnostic Bible. If I know that I want to check someone's vitamin D because they could be deficient, but maybe that's not paid for by the insurance company, but a SSRI, an antidepressant, I can easily prescribe. Now, if I was to prescribe an SSRI and that is not what the person needs, I don't know that because I'm not able to bill the insurance to check the vitamin D before we even go down the psychiatric kind of labeling pathway, if you will. So we're not looking through a holistic lens. Our current system of care is the dominant culture is the Western medical model, which is psychiatric focus, right? Like what's wrong with them versus what's happening within them. And so if we can open up the doorway and start really exploring what's happening with people, we can look at the 8 dimensions of wellness that our federal government actually created, these 8 dimensions of wellness specifically for people with substance use histories or challenges, and how to help them become well and thrive in their life. Why wouldn't we offer any one of those 8 dimensions in our overarching systems of care? Well, because the pharmaceutical companies drive the market and the insurance companies will pay for that, but they won't pay for something that isn't necessarily deemed medically necessary. So there's a lot. It's a big, monstrous broken system. And, I have dyslexia, so I see gaps and patterns really easily. And over the 2.5, almost 3 decades of working in the system, I'm like, I just can't do it anymore. I don't want to drive people down a pathway that they may not need, because the research shows that people with psychiatric conditions are dying 25 years earlier than the average person. And that actually forced the systems of traditional medical health and mental health or behavioral health to actually start talking to each other, because there were so many gaps and prescriptions happening, that so many different social determinants of health that people were lacking, so much trauma that people were experiencing that would present as an illness, but really it was a way of their trauma, as it gets activated, would then present in one way, but that wouldn't be explored. They just were given a psychiatric label and then medicated for that. So there's so many areas of adversity that we all experience in this world. And then we look at the people doing the helping or the healers, and my heart goes out to them. I get emotional because I have a lot of friends who are nurses and doctors and and social workers and peer supports, and there isn't continuity. And so I aim to take the trauma informed care principles and help people apply them in their personal and professional lives. And then that trickles down as they heal or are aware of certain things. It helps them also be more responsive rather than reactive to the people they serve and their family members.
Yeah, that sounds, wow, that's a lot.
Yeah, it is a lot. Sorry. I could spend hours talking about this. It's just
No, it's completely fine and dandy. I can tell that you are passionate about it and you want to help people in the world. And I know there are a lot of people that need help out there. So, guys, I want to let you know that I put her contact information in the show description tonight. I don't normally do that, but I felt that it was important to make sure that gets out there tonight, because I think there are a lot of people out there struggling, and she definitely wants to help you. So let her know if you ever need to talk or anything. But I want to point out that we have Ben Bruce Ifeanyi Jr., who he's actually from Nigeria, but he is working in the DR Congo, so Democratic Republic of Congo in Africa tonight. And he's saying Happy New Year because it's already past 12 o'clock there. Pretty freaking awesome. And I just want to say thank you so much, Ben, for watching with us. We also have, hang on, we have Judy MC, who is watching us from Nairobi, Kenya. And then we have my dad, who is watching us from across the street. And then we have Rodney Lance, who is watching us from my hometown here in Ohio. And then we have Kelly Steinke Beckett, who is watching us from Columbus, Ohio. Welcome in, Kelly. I hope you're having a fantastic New Year's Eve. And we are live tonight, guys. So I definitely would like you guys to ask some questions. It would help me out, but it would also help liven up the show and keep it going. So I'm curious though, what drove this passion for helping medical workers and helping all these people that might have vicarious trauma, as you call it?
Yeah, what drove it is working in the system. I worked in hospitals, I ran nonprofits, I contracted with hospitals and crisis teams and created a global warm line that actually was like a crisis line where people just wanted to feel heard. And I really, 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 really can't express enough the exhaustion that happens when you work in these helper fields. And that's even teachers, etc. Right? So I'm not I'm just speaking from my own experience of working in behavioral health, substance use, mental health, corrections, and houseless communities, and crisis work. And the more I began to see the staff that I worked alongside and the staff that I supervised, as well as my own experiences with burnout and compassion fatigue and vicarious trauma, something just kind of really snapped in me and said, I am so tired of conforming to someone else's belief system on what is helpful. And when we come into this line of work, whatever line of work we come into in the helper field or the healer field, we come because we're there with our heart. But then we start to shut that heart down and to survive. And that is not the way our the people who need help feel safe. That's not the way that they feel connected with us as the helper. And when the more we started to shut our heart down, wasn't necessarily because of what we were observing, but it was because the way we were trained. We were trained not to get attached. We were trained to disconnect. We were trained not to get emotionally involved, which I get, right? That's so that we could survive. But there's a limit to that. And when we do that, then it spews out into every other area in our lives. And it actually does more harm than good. It does more harm to the people that we're serving, and it does more harm to the culture in which we're working, and it does more harm to ourselves internally, because then we start to suppress those emotions, and then we find destructive ways that our society says are acceptable or not acceptable in coping with that. And the
Well,
more I started to watch them get sick, the
may I
more I
ask?
decided I had to leave. Yeah.
May I ask what are you calling acceptable and unacceptable?
hmm Yeah. So, as far as ways of coping, society might not judge somebody who is utilizing the gym, for example, or exercise um, in access, right? Like, so 7 days a week, 5, 6 hours a day, working out, which is actually a great way to release trauma from your body. But it could interfere with all other aspects. It could be considered addictive, right? So now you're releasing these pleasure endorphins, and you're getting, this feeling great, and physically and in your mind, but it could interfere in other areas of your life, in your relationships, or it can keep you from feeling your feelings, which your feelings, when they're suppressed, they manifest. Eventually, they come out your neck sideways.
Yeah.
Or when trauma builds up in your body, one little thing could set you off. And then your brain, literally, the way trauma affects your brain, Dr. Dan Siegel talks about your lid flipping, your prefrontal cortex flips, and it disengages, which creates a dysregulation. And then you're only using about 15, if you're an adult over 27, you're only using about 15% of your decision making when your lid is flipped. And this could be flipped for minutes, moments, months, years. And so if you're working in a high stress job and your lid is flipped, you might not be thinking in the way that you would if your lid was regulated. So if your emotions aren't releasing, it can create these trauma activations, which then your lid flips. But then you also go into survival brain. And when trauma happens, your brain needs it'll take you different places, if you will. So some people might have diagnoses of schizophrenia, but really what they could be, but not necessarily explored, is living a life in survival and trauma activated state, which then it shifts the way you see the world and show up in the world. And then your neural pathways start creating images or thoughts or um, hearing things and seeing things that others don't, that maybe you didn't have before, right? So there's so many different ways that might seem acceptable or diagnosable, but then if you're using drugs, that's considered criminal. And if you're using criminal illicit drugs to survive in the same way that someone might go to the gym or eat lots of sugar or smoke lots of cigarettes or have patterned relationships or even thinking about suicide or cutting yourself or doing some sort of um, behavior that looks to the world as wrong or bad, then it actually can exacerbate that through shame and guilt. And then we're not giving people the tools necessarily. We're just diagnosing and sending them off and saying, here's your diagnosis, take this medication. But if you work in the system of care, the stigma that those types of behaviors that have, like I just described, have so much stigma attached to them that if I'm working as an executive director of a nonprofit and I have all these contracts with these hospitals, I'm not going to tell you that I'm thinking about suicide right now, right? Like I'm going to keep that to myself. Why? Because then they're going to start treating me different as I'm fragile, weak, or incompetent. And then I might need to go over there and see this medical professional or this psychiatrist and get some meds.
Yeah.
Well, that may or may not be true, but I don't want to start there. I want to look at what are the other factors that are causing this to come up. And so I am a survivor of trying to die by suicide as a teenager. And today I know that that is actually a survival skill. And if I start to think about suicide at 53 years old, I know that there's an imbalance in my life and I'm not balanced. It's actually a survival skill for me. It's actually a language of pain. And so substance use is a language of pain. Any one of these behaviors, whether it's smoking or going to the gym or radical tons of sex, whatever it is, that somebody else formulates an opinion and says this is unhealthy. Well, is it unhealthy or is that your belief and your values are getting in the way? And therefore, I am driving you down a pathway because of my belief and my values that your behavior is wrong. So why not open up the container and let people start to explore what's beneath the surface, what's leading them to these beliefs, these values, and these behaviors within themselves, and start healing what's beneath the surface. Stop putting a band-aid on it. Stop giving people psychiatric medications before you're checking their diet, their exercise, their vitamins, their zinc, their B's, their D's. It's a broken system. And I'm tired of being afraid to talk about it. And when I was running and working in nonprofits, you're not allowed to say certain things because funding comes or it can be taken away. And I know a lot of people who work in these systems want to say exactly what I'm saying. And I don't work for anybody today. You either love me or you hate me. And eventually you're gonna see the value in what I say. But I know there's just a lot of people out there that are saying, hell yeah, Angel, spot on. People are dying because our system's broken. So I want to bring back hope. I want to start, and I have been on lots of legislative action teams. I've helped change laws in Oregon. I've sat on committees nationally. Um, I want to force our system of care or our federal government and our insurance providers and our states and our policymakers to actually start looking at holistic options as treat as kind of the first menu option. But that's That's a big fight, and I know, but that'll come over time. Legislative advocacy to change our laws, but parity law to allow people to get mental health services or counseling services. That took 5 years to get approved because they wouldn't only allow three counseling sessions for people to go to counseling, but yet drug and alcohol treatment, you could spend years in drug and alcohol treatment, but they wouldn't allow us to get, mental health assessment, which
That's
on
weird.
one hand, yeah, it took 5 years to get that through to the lawmakers to make it to where the insurance companies actually had to pay for mental health. But now it's become more of the same. It's like, oh, let's drive people down these psychiatric systems and let's give them more pharmaceutical drugs and not help them heal, but let's create more customers. Because, and I'm not dissing those who are on psychiatric meds, I've taken them myself, but I don't believe that they should be the first step. They should be only emergency step, and then they should be the last step if it's not emergent.
Yeah, I agree. So
That's why
I
doctors won't go to the psychiatric,
yeah.
counseling. That's why
So
they die.
I want to point out something here. Ben Bruce says in the comments that that's pretty awesome. Angel, keep up the great job. He applauds you.
Thank you.
And I applaud you too because you are doing something that is important, that is helping people in the world. And I find that very admirable.
Thank you. Thank you. And I
Yeah.
think you are too. I think you're kind of cool. And yeah, I can't wait to see you again. Give you another hug. Oh, which you did bring up. I know we're at just about time, but I just wanted to clarify. So the free hugs is a trauma aware, hope driven suicide prevention initiative. And so, changing the conversations when people talk about suicide, how do we learn to respond with hope and stop reacting out of fear? Because when we react out of fear and we drive people down a pathway, or we tell them, stop thinking about that or whatever we're doing, we're meeting our need. We're not meeting the need of the person talking to us. And so when we do that, they actually stop talking to us because they're not feeling safe, they're not feeling heard. And so, how do we learn to listen, validate, and shut the hell up and listen? Right? Like that's my motto: is shut up and listen. There's a reason they must trust you in that moment. So, free hugs is that initiative, and then suicide as a language of pain. And so, not is a language of pain because it's not that for everyone. And I just wouldn't acknowledge that. But I like to say suicide as a language of pain. And I learned that very early on through a beautiful woman in a curriculum that I trained for nearly 17 years called Intentional Peer Support by Sherry Mead and Chris Hansen. And they too believe in changing the way we are with people and learning to shift that system so that people can survive and thrive and not just survive.
Yeah. That is really great. So I'm trying to think what to say here because that is a lot to take in. But so yeah.
It is a
So
lot. I'm a
what
lot.
what is something someone can do if they have experienced vicarious trauma?
Self awareness is key. And so, I fortunately, I mentioned at the beginning, I lived on the streets when I was a teenager and I did a lot of drugs. And then what I failed to mention was I went into drug treatment in 1996 when I made a promise on July 5th of 96 that to dedicate the rest of my life to helping others. I said, God, if you're real, get me out of this life and I'll dedicate the rest of my life to helping others. And I was fortunate back in 1996 to have a woman from Eastern India who was my therapist. She was there. She was the drug and alcohol counselor at the treatment center I was at. And it was 6 months of residential. And she focused on trauma. She didn't focus on drug addiction as we know it in the disease model. She wove some of that into it, but she really focused on helping us learn to self-reflect and learn how our trauma has affected our life and our decisions, and it really helped us live really kind of release shame and guilt of the choices that we made in order to survive through some really tough traumatic experiences. And for me, it just happened to be using a lot of drugs, and moving around a lot, and unhealthy domestic violence relationships, right? But I thought I was broken. And what I learned is I just had a lot of trauma. And if we can understand the trauma that we carry, then we can learn to feel it and heal it. And we can learn to self-reflect. And that's what I teach on, and I support and coach on, is to really like kind of like peel the onion, of self. If I can understand my own bias, my own assumptions, my own belief systems, my own behaviors, my own traumas, then I can start to feel what I have learned to suppress and hide through doing. We are human beings. We are not supposed to be human doers. But in our system of society, it has taught us to be distracted and not go inward. It has taught us to look out externally, and avoid what's happening internally. And we've been teaching people this since shit, I had black and white television, right? Like back in the day, there wasn't even cable, right? We've been teaching people focus on the external. So really helping, learning to peel the onion internally and become self-aware. Don't shame ourselves for reacting when we're pissed off or when something happens and we react out of fear. We've learned to do that. And we can unlearn to do that. We just have to be willing to sit in some uncomfortable feelings without masking it with medication or substances or food. My biggest favorite is chocolate and Oreos and milk. When I'm not doing so well and I'm imbalanced, the first thing I do is go get me some half gallon of milk and some Oreos, and I'll eat a whole package of Oreos. But that is just a perfect example of how we've learned to utilize things that induce pleasure endorphins or bring us to a different pleasure place to avoid what we're feeling or thinking or experiencing in that moment or in that time period. And believe me, I've spent months in bed, and trauma's real, and it passes through epigenetics. And what that means is it passes from generation to generation. And so if we don't feel it to heal it, then it's going to keep passing down from generation to generation. And I refuse to continue to pass that stuff down and this added stuff I acquired during this lifetime to my daughters and my grandkids and my great grandkids. So by me modeling healing today, my daughters are seeing a healer, a more healed version of myself. And then their genes, their DNA structure changes because they're observing that healing, and then they start to heal, and then their children, and then their grandchildren, their children's children. Believe it or not, I can go on this topic. I normally train, 3 days, full days, or 5 full days at a time. 40 hours of training isn't even enough to give an organization or their staff this information. But if we can help them anchor it into something that resonates with them personally, then they can start to filter it in a whole different way of what the federal guidelines of trauma-informed care principles really mean. And it's just not another buzzword. So trauma-aware approach, which is Alchemize Hope's pathway to hope, it's our signature blueprint that helps you apply that, but apply the principles, but applying the principles in every aspect of your work, and your personal life with your friends, your family, etc. That's the only way we're going to start healing the world,
Wow.
is to do something different and not say we're doing something different and creating more of the same over and over and over, calling it something different.
Yeah.
Right? That's what keeps happening. And so I have to work for myself unless there's some radical organization out there that wants to hire me or contract with me to help them shift their culture.
Wow.
It
You're
is what it is.
you're really doing a lot, and that is amazing. I
Good
know
job.
you are making a difference in the world, so stick with it. You're
Thank you.
just doing amazing work, seriously.
Thank
So,
you.
but we actually went over time,
We
which
did.
is
I'm
okay.
sorry.
I'm
I'm
not
sorry.
I'm not crying about it, but because I know this information was needed to be heard by people, so I think it's fine and dandy. But I need everybody out there, including you, Angel, to do me a favor this week, next week, and for the rest of your life. I need you to make every second count.
I do
Why?
believe that.
Because you never know when the seconds are going to run out on your one life. I'll see you guys back here next Tuesday. Have a fantastic New Year's Eve. Thank you, Angel. I appreciate you so much. Everybody, have a great night.
Happy New Year. 2025 is a whole nother level. Let's do